The rain streaked down my apartment window, blurring the city lights into a watercolor smear. My coffee had long gone cold, but I hadn't touched it in hours. Tonight wasn't for work, it was for Lily. And then the phone chimed, her face filling the screen, that gap-toothed grin instantly making my chest feel lighter. It was a familiar scene, one I looked forward to every month. Lily, 8 years old, beamed from her grandparents' home in Willow Creek, holding up a lumpy clay creation. "Daddy, look what Grandma made me." "That's amazing, sweetheart. Is that for your school project?" I asked, keeping my voice bright. "Uh-huh. Mrs. Davis said we could make anything we wanted about animals. Grandma's letting me use her kiln this weekend." I managed a tight, fractional smile. This weekend. The monthly arrangement that sent Lily to her maternal grandparents' house, 3 hours north. I'd fought against it during the divorce 2 years ago, but Sarah's lawyer had painted me as obsessive. The judge sided with family stability, which apparently meant Lily spending every third weekend with Robert and Susan Caldwell. "Where's Grandma now?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Making dinner." "Grandpa's." Lily's eyes shifted off-screen, her smile faltering. "He's in his study." I felt the familiar knot form in my stomach. Robert Caldwell had always unsettled me, even back when Sarah and I were dating. A retired high school principal, respected in a small town, always wearing a cardigan and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look grandfatherly and harmless. But I'd caught glimpses of something else in those watery blue eyes, a coldness that surfaced when he thought no one was watching. "You having fun otherwise, baby?"
"Yeah.
"Tomorrow Grandma is taking me to the—" Lily stopped mid-sentence. I heard a door open in the background. Her expression changed, her face going carefully neutral.
"Hi, Grandpa."
"Hello there, little Lily." Robert Caldwell's voice drifted through the speaker. That particular false warmth I'd heard 1,000 times. "Still talking to your father?" "Just saying good night," Lily said quickly, too quickly. "Your grandmother needs help in the kitchen. Run along now." It wasn't a suggestion. "Okay.
Bye, Daddy."
"Love you." "Love you too, sweetheart. I'll see you." The phone shifted. I caught a glimpse of Lily's bedroom ceiling. Heard her footsteps retreating, but the call didn't end. The phone must have fallen onto her bed, still transmitting audio. I almost hung up. Then I heard Lily's voice again, distant now. "Grandpa, I was still talking to. I said your grandmother needs you." Robert's voice had changed, stripped of its false gentleness. "Don't make me tell you twice." My hand tightened on my phone. I should hang up. This was an accident, an invasion of privacy. But something made me keep listening. Silence for several long seconds. Then Lily again, even more distant. I'm going. Not that way. Come here first." Robert's voice was barely audible now. "I want to show you something in my study." But Grandma said, "Your grandmother doesn't need to know everything, does she? We've talked about this, Lily. Our little secrets." My blood turned to ice. Lily's voice, small and frightened. "I don't want to."
"Please, Grandpa."
"Daddy's waiting." "Your daddy isn't here. And if you tell him about our special time, Lily, well, you know what happens. You don't want your parents fighting again, do you? You don't want to be the reason they suffer." I was already on my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I grabbed my car keys with my free hand, still listening. "Please." Lily's voice cracked. "I don't like it when—" "Hush now, just for a little while. Be a good girl." I ran for the door, phone pressed to my ear. The stairwell echoed with my pounding footsteps. I burst into the parking garage, fumbling with my key fob. Through the phone, I heard a door close. Then Lily's voice, clearer now, panicked. "No, Grandpa, please," I said. "I don't want to." "You're being dramatic, Lily, just like your mother. Now hold still." "No," Lily screamed. "Stop it. Daddy. Daddy, help." Then the sound of impact. Plastic hitting hardwood. The phone had fallen. I heard scuffling. Lily's sobs. And then, "You little witch." Robert Caldwell's voice. All pretense gone, replaced with rage. "After everything I've done for you, after I've been so patient, get away from me." Lily shrieked. My tires squealed as I peeled out of the garage. I switched the call to my car speakers. One hand on the wheel, the other grabbing my second phone to dial 911. Grandma. Grandma, help. Lily's screams turned desperate. Then Susan Caldwell's voice, sharp and sudden. Robert, what is going on? She stopped. A pause that stretched too long. Oh my God. Robert, what did you? Shut up, Susan. This doesn't concern you. You're Lily's sweetheart. Come here. Stay back. Robert snapped. All of you just. A crash. Something heavy hitting the floor. Susan screamed. Lily sobbed. Then a sound I would hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. A single deafening crack that could only be a gunshot. Susan's scream cut off abruptly. Lily's voice, thin with terror. Grandma. Grandma. Look what you made me do, Robert said, his voice hollow. Look what you made me do, Lily. This is your fault. Your father's fault. If you'd just been good. Monster? You're a monster. Lily sobbed. Another gunshot. Then silence. Terrible. Complete silence. Lily. My voice cracked. Lily? Baby, answer me. Nothing. The line stayed open, but I heard only my own ragged breathing in the car's speakers. Lily, please, baby, please answer me. Lily. The silence stretched on. I called her name over and over, my voice hoarse, while my other hand fumbled with my second phone. The 911 operator answered. Noon Hunter Telft. What's your emergency? My daughter. I could barely speak. My daughter's in danger. There's been shooting. Shots fired. 2247, Maplewood Drive, Willow Creek. Send everyone. Send everyone now. I gave them the details in broken fragments while my foot pressed the accelerator to the floor. The speedometer climbed past 90 as I flew down the empty highway, rain hammering my windshield. The 911 operator kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Was my daughter injured? I didn't know. Who fired the shots? Robert Caldwell. Was the shooter still armed? Probably. Was anyone else in the house? Not anymore. I ended the call and tried Lily's phone again. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. I tried 46 more times over the next 2.5 hours, my mind conjuring increasingly horrific scenarios. Her face, her gap-toothed smile, her small hand in mine when we walked to the park. Her voice asking if I'd come to her school play. Her trust that I would always protect her. I'd failed. I'd heard her screaming for help, and I'd been 3 hours away. The rain intensified as I crossed into Willow Creek County. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the winding country road that led to the Caldwell house. No other cars, no sirens. Where were the police? I'd called them 2 hours ago. I skidded to a stop in front of 2247 Maplewood Drive at 1:47 a.m. The house sat back from the road, a 2-story colonial that looked deceptively peaceful in the storm. Lights blazed from every window. The front door hung open. No police cars, no ambulance, nothing. I killed my engine and ran through the rain, my shoes splashing through puddles. I was halfway to the porch when I saw her. Lily sat on the top step, alone in the downpour. Her pink pajamas were soaked through, plastered to her small frame. Her hair hung in wet tangles around her face. She stared straight ahead, unnaturally still, her arms wrapped around her knees. Lily. I sprinted up the steps. Baby, are you? I stopped, washed by the rain, but still visible, trailing down the porch steps from the open door. Diluted pink rivulets running through the grooves between the wooden boards. Lily slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were wrong. Too wide. Too empty. The eyes of someone who'd seen the end of the world. Daddy, she whispered. Please don't look inside. I dropped to my knees in front of her, my hands hovering, afraid to touch her, afraid she might shatter. Are you hurt? Did he hurt you? She didn't answer, just stared at me with those hollow eyes. Lily, sweetheart, I need to know if you're hurt. I'm not hurt. Her voice was flat, mechanical. Not the way you mean. My hands were shaking. I made myself breathe, made myself focus. Okay, baby. I'm going to check inside. And then we're leaving. We're going right to the hospital. Don't look, Daddy. Please don't look. But I had to. I had to know. I stood and walked through the open doorway into the Caldwell house. The smell hit me first. Copper and gunpowder and something else, something worse. The foyer was pristine. Nothing out of place. Family photos lined the walls. Smiling faces frozen in happier times. Sarah's high school graduation. Lily's third birthday party. Robert and Susan's 40th anniversary. I followed the blood trail down the hallway. It led to Robert Caldwell's study. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. Susan Caldwell lay on her back near the desk. Her eyes open and unseeing.
A hole in the center of her chest.
Blood pooled beneath her, soaking into the Persian rug. Her hand was outstretched toward the door, as if she'd been reaching for the hallway, reaching for Lily. Robert Caldwell sat in his leather desk chair, slumped forward over his antique desk. The right side of his head was missing. A revolver lay on the floor near his dangling hand. Blood and brain matter spattered the wall behind him, covering his framed teaching awards and family photographs. On the desk in front of him, barely visible beneath his left arm, was a composition notebook. I stepped closer, my stomach roiling. The notebook was open, filled with Robert's precise handwriting. The last entry was dated today. She threatened to tell. After all these years, she threatened to destroy everything. I gave her opportunities. I was patient. But children today, they don't understand gratitude. They don't understand sacrifice. It's Lily's fault. Sarah's fault for raising her wrong. For leaving her with me. The irony. Sarah was the perfect one. The obedient one. She learned. But this one, this Lily, she fights. She cries. She makes such a fuss. Susan finally saw tonight. Finally walked in at the wrong moment. Saw what I had to do to teach Lily proper respect. The look on Susan's face, betrayal, disgust. As if I was the monster. As if I hadn't built this family, this life, this perfect image. She was going to call the police. She made me do it. They all made me do it. My vision blurred. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails drew blood from my palms. The notebook continued, but I couldn't read anymore. Couldn't process the words that made it clear this hadn't been the first time. That Sarah, my ex-wife, Lily's mother, had been a victim, too. The monster had documented everything. His justifications, his twisted logic, his complete lack of remorse. And then he'd taken the coward's way out. I stumbled backward out of the study, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I made it to the hallway before I vomited, my body rejecting what my mind had witnessed. When I could stand again, I wiped my mouth and walked back to the porch. Lily hadn't moved, still sat in the same position, rain streaming down her face. I scooped her into my arms. She didn't resist, just let herself be lifted like a rag doll. I carried her down the steps toward my car, careful not to slip on the wet stairs. "Where are the police?" I asked, more to myself than to her. "They came," Lily said quietly against my shoulder. "2 officers.
They talked to me."
Asked what happened. I told them. I stopped walking. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That Grandpa was doing bad things to me. That Grandma saw that he ended her life. That he ended his own life." Her voice remained flat, emotionless. "They went inside. Then they came back out and made some calls. They said more people were coming. They said I should wait for my father." "They just left you sitting in the rain?" I told them to go. I wanted to wait alone. Lily finally looked up at me. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of emotion in her eyes. "I didn't want to be in that house anymore, Daddy. Not ever again." I held her tighter, my throat closing up. "You never have to be. I promise, baby. Never again." I settled her into the passenger seat of my car, buckled her in, then grabbed the emergency blanket from my trunk and wrapped it around her. She didn't speak, just stared out the windshield at the house with its blazing windows and open door. As I pulled away, I caught sight of flashing lights in my rearview mirror. More police finally arriving. An ambulance, a fire truck. Too late, hours too late, but Lily was alive. That was all that mattered right now. As we drove through the storm back toward the city, back towards some semblance of safety, my mind was already working, already planning. Because as the shock began to recede, one thought crystallized with diamond-hard clarity. Robert Caldwell had gotten off easy. One bullet, instant death, no suffering, no real justice. And if the notebook revealed what I suspected, that this had gone on for months, maybe years, that Sarah might have known, might have been a victim herself and stayed silent, then there were more people responsible, more people who'd let this happen. The law would handle the immediate aftermath, the investigation, the reports, but David Miller would handle everything else. I glanced at Lily, huddled in her blanket, trembling despite the car's heat. My daughter, my responsibility to protect. I'd failed once. I wouldn't fail again. The rain continued to fall as we drove through the night, leaving Willow Creek and its horrors behind, but I knew we couldn't really leave it behind. Not yet. Not until everyone who'd enabled Robert Caldwell's darkness had paid in full. 3 days later, I sat in the sterile waiting room of Dr. Olivia Reed's office while Lily attended her third emergency therapy session. The child psychologist had been recommended by the hospital, a specialist in trauma and systematic violation. Lily had barely spoken since that night, moving through our apartment like a ghost. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. She'd been calling nonstop since the news broke. I'd been sending her to voicemail, not ready to hear whatever justifications or excuses she might offer, but I needed answers. Eventually, I would need to confront her, just not yet. Instead, I opened the email from Detective Thomas Riley, the lead investigator on the case. Riley had been professional, but not particularly warm, treating the whole thing as an open-and-shut incident involving a self-inflicted fatality. Tragic, he'd called it, but at least the perpetrators saved the taxpayers some money. The email contained a preliminary forensics report. I forced myself to read it. Each word, a knife in my gut. Susan Caldwell, cause of death, gunshot wound to the chest. Time of death estimated at 7:05 p.m. Robert Caldwell. Cause of death, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Time of death estimated at 7:05 and 40 seconds p.m. The notebook found on the scene had been entered into evidence. Riley noted that it contained disturbing content suggesting long-term systematic violation of a minor, but didn't elaborate. The district attorney's office was reviewing it to determine if any other parties should be investigated. My jaw clenched. Disturbing content. That's what they called a predator's confession journal. The report continued with forensic details about the crime scene, bullet trajectories, blood spatter patterns, clinical descriptions of horror. Then buried in the final paragraph, a note that made my blood run cold. Physical examination of the minor victim confirms signs consistent with historical sexual violence over an extended period. Child Protective Services has been notified. The minor's mother, Sarah Caldwell, has requested custody. Given the lack of evidence of her direct involvement and her status as the biological parent, this request will likely be granted pending a standard CPS review. I read the paragraph 3 times, my fury building with each pass. Sarah wanted custody. The same Sarah whose father had inflicted horrific mistreatment on our daughter for God knows how long. The same Sarah who'd insisted on those monthly weekends in Willow Creek, who dismissed my concerns as paranoia and overprotectiveness. My phone buzzed again.
Sarah.
I answered this time. David, finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. You want custody?
My voice was ice.
A pause. I'm her mother, David. She needs her mother right now. She needs her mother? I stood up, my voice rising. An older couple in the waiting room looked over, startled. I lowered my volume, but not my intensity. Where was her mother when your father was preying on her? Where were you, Sarah? I didn't know. You think I would have let that happen if I knew? He was my father, David. My father? How long?
What?
How long did you know the truth, Sarah? I've read his notebook. I know he did this before. I know you were. I couldn't say it. Couldn't voice the suspicion that had been growing since I'd read those entries. How long? The silence on the other end stretched too long. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't like with me. What he did to me was different. I was older, and he stopped when I got married. He promised he stopped. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. You knew. You knew what he was capable of, and you sent Lily there anyway.
No.
I thought. I convinced myself it was different. That he'd changed. That he wouldn't. Her voice broke into sobs. I wanted to believe he loved her like a normal grandfather. I wanted my father to be the man I pretended he was.
I was wrong, David.
I was so ing wrong. You don't get her back. My voice was steady now, cold with certainty. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what CPS decides. You will never be alone with Lily again. You can't do that. I'm her mother. I have rights. You gave up those rights when you sacrificed our daughter to protect your illusion of a happy family. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I wanted to throw the phone, wanted to scream, wanted to break something. Instead, I sat back down and forced myself to breathe. To think. Dr. Reed's door opened, and Lily emerged, her hand in the older woman's. The therapist's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the concern in her eyes. Mr. Miller, could I speak with you for a moment? I nodded. Lily sat down with a coloring book while I followed Dr. Reed into her office. I need to be direct with you, Dr. Reed said once the door closed. Lily's trauma is severe. The systematic violation was systematic and occurred over approximately 18 months. She has PTSD, possible dissociative episodes, and a profound trust violation that will take years to process. I nodded, my throat tight. I'm also concerned about what she told me today regarding her mother. Dr. Reed pulled out her notes. Lily said that 6 months ago, she tried to tell her mother something was wrong, but she didn't want to go to Grandpa's house anymore. According to Lily, her mother told her to stop being dramatic and that Grandpa was just affectionate. Does that align with what you know? I suspected Sarah knew something. Now I'm certain. I met the therapist's eyes. She called me today. She wants custody. Dr. Reed's expression hardened. Over my dead body. I'll be submitting my professional recommendation to CPS and the court. Lily needs stability, safety, and a parent she can trust. Right now, Mr. Miller, you're the only one who fits that description. Thank you. I stood. Is there anything else I should know? Yes. Dr. Reed hesitated. Lily mentioned something today that concerns me. She said she wants her grandfather to hurt forever. That ending his life was too easy for him. She fixed me with a penetrating stare. She's 8 years old, and she's thinking about revenge. I need to know that you're going to help her process these feelings in a healthy way. That you're not going to validate them or, God forbid, model that behavior. I held her gaze. I want what's best for Lily, whatever that takes. It wasn't a lie. I did want what was best for Lily. And what was best for Lily was ensuring that everyone who'd enabled her horrific mistreatment faced consequences. Real consequences. Not the kind that came from courts and lawyers and official reports. The kind that came from a father who would do anything to protect his daughter. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep in her bed, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and the copies of documentation I'd obtained from Detective Riley. The detective had been surprisingly forthcoming, perhaps because he was a father himself. Perhaps because he understood my need for answers. The notebook, the forensics reports, Lily's statement to police, the CPS preliminary assessment, and most damningly, emails between Robert Caldwell and several of his former colleagues from the high school where he'd been principal. I read through them systematically, building a picture that grew darker with each passing hour. Robert hadn't been working alone. Not completely. The emails referenced a network of individuals, coded language about shared interests and private gatherings. Names appeared repeatedly. Gregory Watkins, Robert's former vice principal. Leo Atkinson, the school district superintendent. Ronald Davenport, a child psychologist who'd assessed Lily 2 years ago after Sarah's divorce attorney had ordered an evaluation. I'd met Davenport. The man had declared Lily perfectly happy and well-adjusted. Had seen nothing to indicate predation or trauma. Had submitted a report supporting Sarah's custody arrangement that included monthly visits to Willow Creek.
Now I understood why.
Davenport had been protecting Robert, protecting the network.
My phone rang.
An unknown number. I answered. Mr. Miller, this is Arthur Finch. I am an attorney representing certain interests related to your former father-in-law's estate. My instincts flared. What do you want? I understand this is a difficult time. I want you to know that my clients are deeply sympathetic to your daughter's situation. We'd like to offer a settlement, generous compensation in exchange for your agreement not to pursue civil litigation or make public statements about Mr. Caldwell's private matters. Private matters? My voice was flat. You mean his documented history of child exploitation? A pause. The documentation you're referring to is subject to legal privilege and ongoing investigation. Making unfounded accusations could be considered defamation. Who are your clients, Mr. Finch? I'm not at liberty to say, but they're prepared to offer $2 million placed in a trust for your daughter's future. All you need to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree not to cooperate with any journalists or authors who might seek to sensationalize this tragedy. I understood. The network was circling the wagons. They wanted to buy my silence before I could expose them. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. I'll email you the preliminary documents, but Mr. Miller, time is of the essence. The offer expires in 72 hours. The call ended. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. $2 million. Money that could pay for Lily's therapy, her college, her future. Money that could buy us a new life far away from Willow Creek and its horrors. All I had to do was stay silent. Let the dead keep their secrets. Let the living escape justice. I looked down at my hands. Hands that had held my daughter as she trembled. Hands that had carried her out of that house. Hands that could do something with the information I'd gathered, or hands that could sign a piece of paper and take the money. I thought of Lily lying in her bed, plagued by nightmares. Thought of the hollow look in her eyes. Thought of all the other children who might encounter Gregory Watkins, Leo Atkinson, Ronald Davenport, and whoever else was part of Robert Caldwell's network. I opened my laptop and began typing a response to Arthur Finch. I'll consider your offer, but first I need some questions answered. Who else knew? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, who else in your network is still actively engaged in preying on children? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I opened a new browser window and started searching for something else. Private investigators, security experts, people who specialized in finding information that others wanted to keep hidden. Because, whatever happened next, I needed leverage. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with and what they were capable of. And then I needed to decide, take the money and run, or burn it all down and damn the consequences. I looked at Lily's closed bedroom door, thinking of my little girl who said ending his life was too easy for the monster who'd violated her. Maybe she was right. Maybe some people deserved to hurt before they fell. The next morning, I dropped Lily at Dr. Reed's office for her daily session and drove across the city to meet Leo Sterling, a private investigator whose name had come up repeatedly in my late-night research. Sterling operated out of a nondescript office above a hardware store, the kind of place designed not to be remembered. Mr. Miller. Sterling was in his 50s, weathered and competent-looking, with the careful eyes of someone who'd seen too much. I read about what happened. I'm sorry. I need information, I said without preamble. I slid a USB drive across the desk. Everything in there is either public record or given to me by the police. I need you to dig deeper, find out who these men are, what they've been doing, and how they've gotten away with it. Sterling plugged in the drive and spent several minutes reviewing the contents, his expression growing darker. Finally, he looked up. This is AF************************************************************************** nightmare. You know that, right? These aren't small-time perverts. We're talking about a former school superintendent, a licensed psychologist, a prominent attorney, people with resources and connections. I know. What exactly are you planning to do with this information? I met his eyes. Make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Sterling studied me for a long moment. I've got 2 daughters myself, 10 and 13. I read what happened to yours, and I barely slept. So, I'm going to be straight with you. I'll find everything you want to know. But what you do with it, that's on you. I don't know. I don't want to know. And I can't be subpoenaed about things I don't know. We clear? Crystal. My rate is $200 an hour plus expenses. This kind of investigation could take weeks. Could cost $30,000–$40,000, maybe more if I have to pay for certain specialized services. I thought of the $2 million Arthur Finch had offered. Blood money, but money that could be put to better use than lining the pockets of enablers and predators.
Do it.
Whatever it costs, I need names, addresses, patterns, evidence, everything. You'll have it. Sterling stood and extended his hand. I shook it. One more thing, Mr. Miller. When this is done, I never met you. This conversation never happened. Understood. I spent the next 2 weeks in a strange limbo. Days were consumed with Lily's therapy appointments, school meetings to arrange her extended absence, consultations with family court attorneys about Sarah's custody challenge. Nights were spent reviewing Leo Sterling's reports as they trickled in, each one more damning than the last. Gregory Watkins, the former vice principal, had been quietly dismissed from 2 previous schools for inappropriate conduct with students. Both times, settlements had been reached and NDAs signed. He now worked as an educational consultant, giving him access to children across multiple districts. Leo Atkinson, the superintendent, had used his position to cover up several allegations against teachers and administrators over the past 15 years. He'd also taken multiple consulting trips to Southeast Asia, destinations known for sex tourism. Immigration records showed Robert Caldwell had accompanied him on 3 of those trips. Ronald Davenport, the psychologist, specialized in custody evaluations. Sterling had found 6 cases where Davenport had assessed children later proven to have been subjected to horrific mistreatment, and in each case, he'd found nothing wrong. He'd also been Robert Caldwell's patient, receiving therapy for anxiety and depression. The therapeutic relationship had been undisclosed in Lily's evaluation, a massive ethical violation that alone could destroy Davenport's career. Arthur Finch, the attorney, wasn't just representing the network.
He was part of it.
Sterling had uncovered sealed juvenile records from 30 years ago when Finch had been charged with soliciting a minor. The charges had been dropped due to insufficient evidence after the victim recanted. The victim had later ended their own life at age 19. And there were others, more names, more connections, a web of predators and enablers who'd protected each other for decades. Sarah appeared in the network's orbit, too, though not as a perpetrator. Sterling's report included old therapy records that Robert had kept, his own daughter's records from when she was a teenager, documenting the profound violation she endured and his treatment plan to keep her compliant and silent. Reading them made me physically ill. My ex-wife hadn't just been a complicit parent. She'd been a victim so thoroughly broken that she'd learned to perpetuate the cycle, offering up her own daughter rather than face the truth about her family. I didn't know whether that made me hate her more or less. On the 14th day after the incident, Arthur Finch called again. Mr. Miller, you've been avoiding my calls. The deadline for our offer has passed. My clients are prepared to withdraw. Tell your clients I want $5 million, I interrupted. Not 5. And I want individual names, everyone who's contributing to the settlement. Everyone who wants my silence. That's not how this works. That's exactly how it works. Now, you wanted to buy my silence. Fine, but I'm not selling cheap. $5 million, full disclosure of who's paying, and a detailed accounting of why they're so desperate to keep this quiet. You have 48 hours. After that, I take everything I know to the FBI and every news outlet in the country. I hung up before Finch could respond. 2 hours later, Leo Sterling called. Whatever you just did, you rattled some cages. I've got people following me. Professional surveillance, not amateurs. Can you handle it? Yeah, but it's going to cost you. I need to bring in some specialists. Make sure my security's airtight. Another 10 grand minimum. Do it. And Calvin, be careful. Always am. I stood at my apartment window, watching the street below. A dark sedan sat parked across the street. Slightly too obvious to be a real threat. A message. We're watching you. Good. Let them watch. Let them worry. Because I was done playing defense, done reacting, done letting these people control the narrative. It was time to go on offense. That night, after Lily was asleep, I composed an email, not to Arthur Finch or the network, to someone else entirely. Mark Jensen ran a true crime podcast that had recently exposed a ring of corrupt police officers in a neighboring state. He was aggressive, unafraid of powerful interests, and had a track record of bringing down people who thought they were untouchable. I attached everything. The full investigative file, from Leo Sterling. Copies of Robert's notebook, the forensic reports, the emails, the travel records, the pattern of covered-up allegations, everything that painted a complete picture of the network. Subject line: The Willow Creek Network. How a retired principal built a child predation ring under everyone's noses. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Send this email and Arthur Finch's settlement offer would evaporate. The network would lawyer up, go into damage control. They'd come after me with everything they had. Lawsuits, intimidation, maybe worse. But Lily would be safe. Because once the story broke, once the spotlight turned on these men, they'd be too busy trying to save themselves to harm anyone else. I thought about the $2 million, the $5 million, money that could change Lily's life. Then I thought about all the other children, the ones Robert Caldwell had harmed before Lily, the ones Gregory Watkins was still positioned to exploit, the ones who would be evaluated by Ronald Davenport and sent into dangerous situations. My daughter had said ending his life was too easy for her grandfather. But I wasn't interested in easy. I was interested in justice. I clicked send. The story broke 72 hours later. Mark Jensen's podcast released a 3-part special series titled The Willow Creek Network. And within 6 hours, every major news outlet had picked it up. The allegations were too specific, too well documented to ignore. Gregory Watkins was arrested within 24 hours on charges of possession of child exploitation material. Evidence Jensen's team had turned over to authorities. His computers contained thousands of images and videos, some featuring children from his own schools. Leo Atkinson resigned from his position as superintendent amid calls for a federal investigation into the school district's handling of predation allegations. His passport was flagged, and he was placed on the no-fly list while investigators examined his travel history. Ronald Davenport lost his license to practice psychology. Multiple former patients came forward with complaints about his unethical conduct and biased evaluations. Criminal charges were pending. Arthur Finch was placed on administrative leave from his law firm while the state bar investigated his involvement. The sealed juvenile records from his past were mysteriously leaked to the press. His career was effectively over. And the story kept growing. More victims came forward. More names were added to the investigation. What had started as one retired principal's crimes became a sprawling exposé of systemic failure, corruption, and deliberate cover-ups spanning 3 decades. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, holding Lily's hand as we sat on the couch. She didn't fully understand the news reports, didn't grasp the magnitude of what was happening, but she understood that people were finally listening, finally believing, finally acting. "Daddy," Lily said quietly during a commercial break. "Are the bad men going to jail?" "Yes, baby. All of them."
Good.
She leaned against my shoulder. "Grandpa should have gone to jail, too. Not just stopped." "I know. You made this happen," Lily said, looking up at me. "Dr. Reed said, I'm not supposed to think about revenge. But you did it anyway, didn't you?" I hesitated, weighing my response. Finally, I decided on honesty. This wasn't revenge, sweetheart. Revenge is about hurting people because you're hurt. This was about justice, about making sure no one else gets harmed the way you were harmed. Lily considered this. "What's the difference?" "Revenge makes you feel better for a little while, but then it just makes you emptier. Justice makes the world safer. Safer is better."
Oh.
Lily was quiet for a moment. "Did it make you feel better?" I thought about it. About the satisfaction I'd felt when the arrest started, about the grim determination that had carried me through the investigation, about the nights I'd spent consumed with rage, and the need to make someone, anyone, pay for what had happened to my daughter. "A little," I admitted. "But what really makes me feel better is knowing you're safe and that you're going to heal. That's what matters most." Lily nodded and turned back to the TV. I kissed the top of her head, marveling at her resilience. She had nightmares still, jumped at loud noises, clung to me in crowded places, but she was here. She was alive. She was talking about it, processing it with Dr. Reed, slowly beginning to rebuild trust in the world. It would take years, maybe a lifetime, but we had time now. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. She'd been calling constantly since the story broke, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to accusatory to desperate. I'd listened to exactly one of them, the one where she'd sobbed about how she'd tried to protect Lily the only way she knew how, by pretending nothing was wrong. It hadn't made me hate her less, but it had helped me understand her. I sent the call to voicemail. Not today, maybe not ever. Some damage couldn't be repaired, only endured. Another call came in immediately after. Leo Sterling. You watching the news? Sterling asked. All day. You did it. You actually ****ing did it. Do you know how many people tried to expose these guys over the years? How many parents, teachers, social workers? They all got shut down, paid off, or intimidated into silence. But you actually brought them down. We brought them down, I corrected. I couldn't have done it without your investigation. Yeah, well, my invoice is in the mail. $37,000. Worth every penny if you ask me. I laughed. A sound I hadn't made in weeks. I'll pay it gladly. One more thing, Sterling said, his tone shifting. You've got protection, right? These guys still have friends. People who might decide you're a threat that needs to be eliminated. I've thought about that. Think harder. I'm serious, Miller.
Get a security system.
Vary your routines. Maybe consider relocating for a while. I'm not running from them. It's not running. It's being smart. You've got a daughter to protect, remember? I glanced at Lily, still absorbed in the TV. You're right. I'll take precautions. After the call ended, I did exactly that. I hired a security consultant to assess my apartment and install a comprehensive alarm system. I changed my phone number and Lily's. I enrolled Lily in a new school under a slightly modified name. Lily Caldwell Miller became Lily Miller, dropping her mother's surname entirely. The family court case resolved itself without a trial. Sarah withdrew her custody petition after her own attorney advised her that fighting it would only result in public testimony about her knowledge of the predatory acts. CPS recommended full custody to me, with supervised visitation for Sarah 2 hours per month at a neutral location with a social worker present. Sarah attended the first visitation. Lily refused to see her. The second visitation, Lily agreed to come but wouldn't speak to her mother beyond monosyllables. By the third visitation, Sarah stopped showing up. She left a voicemail for me explaining that she was entering a residential treatment program to deal with her own trauma. She would respect Lily's needs and give her space. Maybe someday they could have a relationship, but not now. I saved the voicemail just in case Lily wanted to hear it someday. Just in case my daughter ever needed proof that her mother had, in her own broken way, tried to do the right thing in the end. Months passed. The investigation continued to expand. Federal prosecutors built cases against 12 individuals tied to the network. 3 had already taken plea deals in exchange for testimony against the others. Gregory Watkins' trial was set for the following spring. He was facing 43 counts of child exploitation. His attorney tried to argue that Watkins was a victim of Robert Caldwell's manipulation, that he'd been groomed himself. The argument fell flat when prosecutors revealed that Watkins had preyed on children before ever meeting Robert. Leo Atkinson fled the country 2 days before he was scheduled to be indicted. He'd made it as far as Costa Rica before being arrested at the border trying to enter Nicaragua. Extradition proceedings were underway. Ronald Davenport was out on bail, living in his brother's basement, monitored by an ankle bracelet. His trial was scheduled after Watkins. He'd aged 20 years in the 6 months since the story broke. His hair gone white, his face gaunt. I'd seen him once by accident in the grocery store. Davenport had recognized me immediately, his eyes widening with terror before he'd abandoned his cart and fled.
Good.
Let him be afraid. Let him feel a fraction of the fear Lily had felt. Arthur Finch had been disbarred and was facing criminal charges for obstruction of justice. He'd attempted a self-inflicted fatality 3 months after the scandal broke, but had survived. He was currently in psychiatric care, awaiting trial. I took no pleasure in these outcomes, no satisfaction in the destruction of these men's lives. But I felt a deep, abiding sense of rightness, of justice served. Lily's 8th birthday arrived in late November. She wanted a small party, just me, Dr. Reed, and 2 girls from her new school she'd cautiously befriended. No family, no mother, no grandparents, just the people she trusted. We celebrated in the apartment with cake and board games. Lily smiled, genuinely smiled when she blew out her candles. Her wish, she told me later, was for the nightmares to stop. They hadn't yet, but they were coming less frequently. And Lily was learning to fight them, to remind herself that she was safe, that the monster was gone and couldn't harm her anymore. After the party, after Lily's friends went home and Dr. Reed said goodnight with a warm hug and a reminder to call if we needed anything, I tucked my daughter into bed. "Daddy," Lily said as I turned out the light. "For what, baby?" "For believing me. For saving me. For making the bad men stop." My throat tightened. "You don't have to thank me for that. That's my job. That's what fathers do." "Not all fathers." Lily's voice was very small in the darkness. "Some fathers are the bad men." "I know. But I'm not that kind of father. I'm never going to be that kind of father." "I know." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you think I'll ever be normal again?" The question gutted me. I sat back down on the edge of her bed, finding her hand in the dark. "Sweetheart, you're already normal. What happened to you wasn't normal. But you're brave and smart and strong. And yes, you've been hurt. But hurt people can heal. Dr. Reed says so. And I believe her. I believe in you." "Okay." Lily squeezed my hand. "I believe you." I sat with her until she fell asleep, then sat a little longer, watching her breathe, watching the miracle of my daughter alive and healing and slowly becoming whole again. I thought about revenge, about justice, about the difference Lily had asked me to explain. Revenge would have been finding those men and making them suffer personally. Revenge would have been violence and rage and temporary catharsis that solved nothing. Justice was this. Was watching them destroyed by their own crimes. Was knowing they would spend years or decades in prison, their reputation shattered, their careers ended, their names synonymous with evil. Justice was Lily getting to grow up, getting to heal, getting to have birthday parties and friendships, and a father who would never fail her again. I stood up slowly, careful not to wake her. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Gregory Watkins sat in a cell awaiting trial. Leo Atkinson languished in a Costa Rican jail. Ronald Davenport counted the days until his own trial, knowing his life, as he'd known it, was over. Arthur Finch recovered from his self-inflicted fatality attempt, facing the reality of his choices and their consequences. And Robert Caldwell was gone. His reputation destroyed posthumously. His name a cursed word in the community he'd once dominated. They'd all paid a price. Not enough, maybe. Prison was too clean, too safe, too civilized for what they'd done. But it was something. It was justice. And sometimes I reflected justice had to be enough. Because the alternative, the consuming rage, the obsessive need for personal vengeance, the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole if I let it, that wouldn't help Lily heal, wouldn't make me a better father, wouldn't honor the promise I'd made to myself the night I'd carried her out of that house. My phone buzzed. A message from Mark Jensen. "Kenny, thought you'd want to know. The documentary about the Willow Creek Network just won an Emmy. And more importantly, 3 more victims came forward this week. Cases in different states. Your decision to go public 3 years ago is still creating ripples, still bringing justice. Thank you for trusting me with the story." I typed back. "Not my story. Lily's and all the other victims. I just made sure people listened." "You did more than that. You gave those victims justice. That's no small thing." I didn't respond. I pocketed my phone and stood at the window a while longer, thinking about fathers and daughters, monsters and heroes, revenge and justice. And I thought about a little girl who'd sat in the rain, covered in blood, telling her father not to look inside. A little girl who'd survived the worst humanity had to offer and was slowly, painfully learning to trust the world again. She was the real hero of the story. I was just the father who refused to let her down twice. I turned away from the window and walked down the hall to my own bedroom. Tomorrow I'd take Lily to therapy. Tomorrow I'd review more documents from the prosecution. Tomorrow I'd continue the work of being present, being patient, being the father my daughter needed. But tonight I would sleep. And if the nightmares came, because they came for me, too, replays of that phone call, of what I'd found in that house, I would remind myself of the same thing I told Lily. The monsters were gone. They couldn't harm anyone anymore. And that, in the end, was victory enough. 3 years later, I stood in the back of a packed courtroom, watching the final piece of the puzzle fall into place. Gregory Watkins, the last of the network to go to trial, sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his head bowed as the jury foreman read the verdict. On count 1, possession of child sexual exploitation material, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, distribution of child sexual exploitation material, we find the defendant guilty. The foreman continued through 41 more counts.
Guilty. Guilty.
Each verdict was a nail in Watkins' coffin. And with each one, I felt a small piece of the weight I'd carried for 3 years lift from my shoulders. When it was over, when Watkins had been led away in chains to await sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into brilliant spring sunshine. I pulled out my phone and called Lily. "Daddy, how did it go?" "Guilty on all counts," I said. "He'll never harm anyone again." "Good." Lily's voice was stronger now, fuller, the voice of an 11-year-old who'd fought her way back from hell and emerged scarred but unbroken. "Dr. Reed says that's supposed to bring me closure. Does it?" "I don't know. Maybe." Lily paused. "I think closure is kind of overrated. I'm not ever going to forget what happened, but I don't think about it every day anymore." "Is that the same thing?" I smiled. "Yeah, baby. I think that's exactly the same thing."
Cool.
"Hey, Daddy. Can Chloe sleep over tonight? We're working on a project for science class." "Of course. I'll pick up pizza for dinner." "Thanks. Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, marveling at the normalcy of that conversation. A girl asking about sleepovers and science projects. A father agreeing to pizza. The mundane, beautiful reality of a life that had been shattered and slowly, painstakingly pieced back together. The last 3 years hadn't been easy. Lily had good days and bad days, progress and setbacks. There had been panic attacks at school, night terrors that left her screaming for hours, therapy sessions where she couldn't stop crying or couldn't speak at all. But there had also been breakthroughs. The first time we had laughed at a stupid joke. The first sleepover she'd agreed to attend. The first time she'd called me from school just to chat, not because she was having a crisis. The slow accumulation of normal moments that meant healing was happening. Even if it was happening in fits and starts. I had been there for all of it. Every therapy session, every school event, every 2 a.m. nightmare. I'd rearranged my entire life around Lily's needs, taking a demotion at work to accommodate the flexible schedule her healing required. I'd learned to recognize her triggers, to give her space when she needed it, and presence when she needed that instead. And I'd learned to let go of the rage that had consumed me in those first months. Of the obsessive need to personally punish every person who'd ever enabled Robert Caldwell's crimes. Of the fantasy of revenge that had sometimes felt more appealing than the difficult, unglamorous work of actually being present for my daughter. Justice had been served. Not perfectly, maybe, not completely, but enough. Watkins would end his life in prison. His sentence would be consecutive terms totaling over 300 years. Leo Atkinson had received 47 years after fighting extradition for 18 months. Ronald Davenport was serving 25 years, having taken a plea deal to avoid trial. And the others, the dozen men whose names had emerged from the expanding investigation. They'd all face consequences, too. Some were in prison. Some had lost their careers. Some had fled the country and lived as fugitives. The network had been destroyed, not by my personal vengeance, but by the exposure of truth, by the courage of multiple victims who'd come forward after Lily's story broke, by prosecutors who'd built meticulous cases, by a justice system that, for once, had actually worked. I walked to my car, thinking about that night 3 years ago when I'd composed the email to Mark Jensen. When I'd chosen justice over revenge, exposure over violence, truth over silence. It had cost me. The settlement money had evaporated. Arthur Finch's offer had been withdrawn the moment the story went public. I had spent tens of thousands on legal fees, security, relocation costs. I'd been sued by 2 of the men I'd exposed, frivolous lawsuits that had ultimately been dismissed. But it still required expensive legal defense. But I'd do it all again without hesitation. Because Lily was alive. Lily was healing. Lily had friends and interests, and a future that wasn't defined solely by what had been done to her. That was the only victory that mattered. I drove home through the city, spring flowers blooming in the parks I passed, thinking about fathers and daughters and the kinds of men who deserved the title, thinking about the difference between justice and revenge, between punishment and healing. When I got home, Lily was in her room with Chloe. The 2 of them bent over a poster board covered in diagrams of the solar system. They looked up when I knocked on the open door. "Pizza should be here in 30 minutes, I said. "Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Miller." Chloe was a cheerful girl with bright red hair and more freckles than face. She'd been the first kid at Lily's new school to reach out, to see past the quiet new girl who flinched at loud noises. They'd been inseparable since. "You need anything else?" "Nope. We're good." Lily smiled at me. That gap-toothed smile I'd been terrified I'd never see again. "Oh, Daddy, I forgot to tell you. I got my essay back from Mrs. Davis. I got an A+. "That's wonderful. What was the essay about?" Lily's smile flickered slightly. "Heroes. Real ones, not like superheroes. I wrote about you." My throat tightened. "Lily, I'm not." "Yes, you are." Lily's voice was firm. "Mrs. Davis said it was the best essay in the class. She said I should consider entering it in the district writing contest." "What did you say about me?" "That you're the kind of hero who doesn't wear a cape or have superpowers. You're the kind who shows up every day and does the hard work of keeping people safe. The kind who believes victims even when it's complicated. The kind who makes sure bad guys face consequences even when it's easier to stay quiet." Lily paused. "I also wrote about how you taught me that healing is harder than revenge, but more important." I had to look away, blinking back tears. "You're the brave one, sweetheart. All you did was everything." Lily crossed the room and hugged me. "I know I don't say it enough, but thank you for everything. For believing me.
For fighting for me.
For being here." I held my daughter, marveling at her strength, at her capacity to trust again after every reason to never trust anyone, at her resilience and wisdom that seemed impossibly mature for 11 years old. "You're going to be okay," I said softly. "More than okay, you're going to be extraordinary." "I know," Lily said simply. "Because I have you." Chloe cleared her throat awkwardly. "This is super sweet and all, but can we maybe finish the poster before the pizza comes? I'm starving." Lily pulled away, laughing. "Chloe's always hungry. It's kind of her superpower." "Hey, rude." The girls went back to their project, arguing cheerfully about whether Pluto should be included as a planet. I watched them for a moment, storing this memory alongside all the others I'd collected over the past 3 years. The ordinary moments, the proof that Lily was more than her trauma, that she had a life beyond what had been done to her. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Reed. "Heard about the Watkins verdict. How are you both doing?" I typed back. "We're good. Lily's having a friend over. Working on a school project. Everything's normal." Normal is an underrated miracle. You should both be proud. We are. I pocketed my phone and went to the kitchen to wait for the pizza. As I stood there, looking at the ordinary clutter of my ordinary life, Lily's school papers on the fridge, her backpack by the door, her shoes kicked off in the hallway, I thought about the path I'd chosen 3 years ago. I could have taken the settlement money, could have stayed silent, could have moved Lily somewhere far away and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. Or I could have gone the other way, could have hunted down those men personally, could have made them suffer in ways the justice system never would, could have prioritized revenge over my daughter's needs. I'd chosen neither. I'd chosen the harder path, the one that required patience and faith in a system that so often failed. The one that prioritized Lily's healing over my own need for satisfaction. The one that traded personal vengeance for systemic justice. And it had worked. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. The doorbell rang. I paid for the pizza and called the girls out for dinner. They ate at the coffee table in the living room, Lily and Chloe chattering about their teachers and classmates, about the new Marvel movie they wanted to see, about whether TikTok was still cool, or if it was time to move on to whatever the next app would be. Normal conversation, normal concerns, normal life. After Chloe's parents picked her up. After Lily went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and pulled up my email. A message from Mark Jensen sat at the top of my inbox. David, thought you'd want to know. The documentary about the Willow Creek Network just won an Emmy. And more importantly, 3 more victims came forward this week. Cases in different states. Your decision to go public 3 years ago is still creating ripples, still bringing justice. Thank you for trusting me with the story. I read the message twice, then closed my laptop. I wasn't interested in accolades or awards. Wasn't interested in being celebrated as some kind of hero. I was just a father who'd done what any father should do. Protected his child and fought to make sure the people who'd harmed her couldn't harm anyone else. That was all. That was everything. I stood up and walked down the hall to Lily's room, opening her door just enough to see her sleeping peacefully. Her face relaxed. No nightmares tonight. Her clay sculpture, the lumpy horse-dog hybrid, sat on her nightstand, a reminder of that terrible phone call 3 years ago. But it was also a reminder that she'd survived, that she'd kept creating and learning and growing despite everything that had tried to break her. I quietly closed the door and walked to my own room. Tomorrow I'd take Lily to her soccer game. Tomorrow I'd help her practice her presentation for the writing contest. Tomorrow I'd continue the work of being present, being patient, being the father she deserved. But tonight I would rest. And I would remember the choice I'd made 3 years ago, to seek justice instead of revenge, truth instead of silence, healing instead of hatred. It had been the right choice. Not the easiest one. Not the most satisfying in the moment, but the right one. Because Lily was safe. Lily was healing. Lily had a future. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. The revenge I'd taken wasn't violence or personal vendetta. It was something more powerful. Exposure, truth, justice. I'd torn down a network of predators, not with my fists, but with evidence and persistence and the courage to make their crimes public. I'd ensure they would spend years or decades paying for what they'd done, that their names would be synonymous with evil, that they would never harm another child. And I'd done it without becoming a monster myself, without scarring Lily further by modeling revenge and violence, without sacrificing my humanity to satisfy my rage. Some people might think that was weakness, that real justice required blood and pain and personal vengeance. But I knew better. The men who'd harmed my daughter were destroyed. Careers ended, reputations shattered, freedom taken, names cursed. They would spend the rest of their lives paying for their crimes. And Lily was free. Free to heal, free to grow, free to be more than what had been done to her. That was victory. That was strength. That was the revenge of a father who loved his daughter more than he hated her predators. And as I turned out the lights and finally, after 3 years of nightmares and hypervigilance and constant worry, allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay, I understood that this was what heroism looked like. Not dramatic confrontations or violent justice. Not revenge fantasies or personal vendettas. Just a father who showed up every day. Who chose healing over hatred, who turned his daughter's tragedy into a catalyst for systemic change that would protect countless other children. Simple, unglamorous, real, and in the end, more powerful than any revenge could ever be. What do you think really made the difference in bringing down such a powerful network?